Tony Romo is on leave from CBS Sports right now, and the timing could not be worse. He got arrested on suspicion of driving while intoxicated in Milwaukee, and days later the network pulled him off the air until further notice. J.J. Watt has already stepped into his chair next to Jim Nantz. Fans on social media are demanding CBS cut him loose for good. But here's what's making this whole situation messier than a routine suspension. For months before any of this happened, reports were already circling that things between Romo and Nantz weren't what they used to be. A partnership insiders were calling strained, with trust that reporters said just wasn't there anymore. So now you've got a guy on leave, a broadcast partner publicly insisting everything's fine, and a growing pile of reporting suggesting it isn't. Tony Romo's situation at CBS just collided with Jim Nantz's defense of him, and the timing has turned a rocky partnership into something people can't stop talking about. So let's start with the moment that kicked all of this into overdrive. The leave, the arrest, and the booth Jim Nantz now has to fill without him. CBS Sports placed Tony Romo on leave from his role, and the network released a short public statement making that official. CBS Sports placed Tony Romo on leave Friday morning until further notice, in its first public statement since his OWI arrest in Milwaukee last week, saying Tony Romo is on leave from his role at CBS Sports until further notice. That's it. No further explanation, no timeline, just a network trying to say as little as possible about one of its highest paid on-air names. The arrest itself happened the week before. Romo was picked up on suspicion of operating a vehicle while intoxicated in Milwaukee, and word of it spread fast. Within days, CBS had to answer the obvious question. Was the top color commentator in its NFL booth going to keep his job? The network's silence through most of that week only made the speculation louder. Enter J.J. Watt. Awful announcing learned that J.J. Watt would join Jim Nantz and Tracy Wolfson as the network's lead NFL broadcast team during Romo's absence, with CBS set to release the rest of its NFL on CBS roster at a later date. That's a real shakeup. Watt isn't some fill-in nobody. He's a future Hall of Famer stepping directly into the chair next to Nantz, and CBS didn't offer a single word about when or if Romo gets it back. Radio voices picked up on how strange the network's silence had been all week. Boomer Esiason told his radio audience barely a day earlier that he didn't expect CBS to comment on the situation at all, a read that lined up with how the network had handled things all week. That's Esiason, a guy who's worked in and around these broadcast booths for decades, reading the room correctly right up until CBS finally blinked and released its statement. Behind the scenes, though, the picture painted by sources close to the network was different from the public panic. The Daily Mail had reported days earlier that CBS executives had already closed ranks around Romo, with one source telling the outlet, "I don't want to act like it's not a big deal, because it is, but it's not going to get him fired." A second source went even further in downplaying the severity of it. A second characterized the arrest as a lapse in judgment rather than anything approaching a fireable offense, noting Romo had reached out to his bosses almost the moment it happened. So you've got two tracks running at once. Publicly, CBS puts him on leave with zero clarity. Privately, sources are telling reporters his job is safe. That contradiction is exactly what's fueled the chaos around this story. Money matters here too. The network pays Romo around $18 million a year on a contract that does not expire until 2030. And Romo has worked in this role for CBS since the start of the 2017 season. A contract like that doesn't get torn up over one incident, no matter how bad the headlines look. One CBS voice put it bluntly to the Daily Mail, saying he might step back a little in the short term, but he isn't going anywhere long term. Still, nobody at CBS was pretending this was nothing. Another source maintained that Romo's OWI arrest is still a big deal despite his job remaining secure. That's the tightrope the network is walking, treating it seriously enough to satisfy public pressure, while making sure everyone understands the color commentator isn't disappearing. The fallout reached beyond the broadcast booth too. In the wake of his arrest, Romo withdrew from the upcoming Texas State Open that had been on his summer schedule. That's a golf event he'd been expected to play in. Scrapped almost immediately. It's a small detail, but it shows how fast the arrest rippled through every part of his public life. Not just his CBS job. What makes this particular moment sting more than past controversies is the calendar. Nantz is slated to call only one preseason game in late August before handling his first regular season assignment in Week 1 on Sept 13. And CBS could be preparing for Watt to simply join the booth for that one preseason game before sliding back to the number 2 team. but the network offered no assurances of a return date for Romo. Translation: nobody at CBS is promising Romo is back in that chair when the games that actually count kick off. And that uncertainty is new. Reports after Romo's arrest for suspicion of OWI indicated the former Cowboys quarterback planned to keep a low profile for the remainder of the summer, but wasn't at risk of losing his job. But now CBS decision at least raises questions about his job status as the season approaches. A week earlier, the story was, he'll be fine. After the leave was announced, the story became, we genuinely don't know. That's the moment we're sitting in right now. A broadcaster on ice, a Hall of Fame defensive end warming up his chair, and a network that still hasn't said when or whether Tony Romo comes back. To understand why this particular crisis is landing so hard, you have to go back to how Romo and Nantz got here in the first place, and why some people inside the business were already questioning whether this partnership was breaking down long before any arrest happened. To understand why this moment carries so much weight, you need to go back to how Romo ended up next to Nantz at all. It wasn't a slow climb through the business. It was about as fast a jump as broadcasting has ever seen. Romo was still an active NFL quarterback when CBS came calling. Dallas Cowboys quarterback Tony Romo was expected to retire from football and go into broadcasting, with the Cowboys expected to release him around the same time. He'd been dealing with injuries for years, and the writing was on the wall in Dallas after Dak Prescott took over the starting job. The departure of the all-time passing leader from the storied franchise had been expected since November, when Romo conceded the job to rookie Dak Prescott after missing 10 weeks with a back injury. Even though the Cowboys were in the middle of a franchise record 11-game winning streak when Romo returned from that injury, multiple networks wanted him. In the broadcasting world, Romo had drawn interest from CBS, Fox, and NBC to be a color commentator. But CBS moved fastest and offered him the biggest platform in the sport, a shot to sit at the very top of the NFL broadcast pecking order without ever calling a single lower-tier game first. He went straight from the field to a #1 booth with Emmy Award-winning play-by-play man Jim Nantz. That's important context. Most analysts spend years in the minor assignments before they ever sniff the lead chair. Romo skipped that entirely. He walked out of a Cowboys locker room and directly into the seat next to one of the most decorated voices in sports television, a partnership that instantly made him one of the most scrutinized new hires in the business. And at first, it was magic. Romo had this uncanny habit of calling plays before they happened, reading formations, predicting blitzes, sounding like he had inside information from both sidelines. Tony Romo was the broadcasting darling for a few years after becoming CBS's #1 NFL analyst in 2017, with a different style from all the other analysts, calling games that fans and media ate up. Nantz, meanwhile, was already a legend by the time Romo arrived, a broadcaster who'd been with the network since the mid-1980s, calling everything from the NFL to the Masters to March Madness. The two of them built a genuine rapport on air, and CBS rewarded it. Romo's deal reportedly grew into one of the largest in sports broadcasting history. Romo has sat beside Jim Nantz on NFL on CBS since 2017, carrying a reported 10-year, $180 million contract through 2030. Nantz, not wanting to be left behind, pushed for a deal of his own that reflected his side of the partnership. Andrew Marchand of the New York Post reported that Nantz wanted to meet or exceed the deal given to Tony Romo, who was reportedly earning around $17 million per year. For a few seasons, the pairing looked like exactly what CBS had hoped for. A Hall of Fame play-by-play voice next to a quarterback who could translate the game in real time better than anyone who tried it before him. They called Super Bowls together. Nantz and Romo called Tampa Bay's victory over Kansas City in Super Bowl LV together for CBS. It was, by most accounts, one of the more celebrated pairings on television. But the very thing that made Romo special, the loose, off-the-cuff, prediction-heavy style, was also the thing that eventually became a target. As the newness wore off, viewers who once marveled at his ability to call plays before the snap started noticing when he got it wrong, when he rambled, when he talked over big moments. And that's where the cracks started to show, cracks that would eventually turn into full-blown reporting about a partnership under strain, long before any arrest ever entered the picture. That shift didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen because of one bad broadcast. It built up over years, through playoff runs, through Super Bowls, through off-season interviews where Nantz kept getting asked the same uncomfortable question: is your partner still good at this job? And each time, Nantz's answers got a little more defensive, a little more pointed, which is exactly where the next chapter of this story picks up. The turning point came during a playoff run, and once it started, it never really stopped. People's opinions on Romo started to change in the past couple of years, with criticism reaching a fever pitch late season. And it wasn't just people on Twitter complaining. The former Cowboys quarterback was taking shots from those who cover media and the NFL. One line from a national writer captured the mood perfectly. ESPN's Don Van Natta Jr. described Romo's approach as someone who hadn't done the preparation but tried to overwhelm every situation anyway, comparing him to a student who skipped studying and instead tried to charm the professor through sheer enthusiasm. That kind of line spreads fast in sports media circles. And it stuck. Nantz decided to answer it directly, and he didn't hold back. On a podcast appearance, he called the wave of criticism a misinformation attempt and pushed back hard against anyone questioning their bond. Jim Nantz called the criticism his broadcasting partner faced this past season a misinformation attempt, and when a report called into question Romo's chemistry with Nantz, the legendary analyst set the record straight, calling Romo one of his best friends and saying he loves the guy, adding that when somebody starts questioning their chemistry, there's an agenda there. He went further, insisting the partnership was as strong as anything he'd experienced in his career. Nantz said there is nothing wrong with their chemistry, that he's never had better chemistry with anybody in his career than Tony, and that anyone covering their business is always welcome to come sit in the booth and watch how the two of them interact on the air, off the air, between plays, calling it amazing and saying he's not worried about it. That defense came right after a rough stretch of games. During the Buffalo Bills and Bengals AFC divisional round game, there were plenty of social media complaints about Romo sounding unsure about plays amid pauses and other unusual moments. Nantz argued the backlash only really caught fire after one specific game. He said it really got more steam after the AFC Championship game, which was their last game that season. And for the life of him, he didn't understand why the outcry hadn't shown up earlier. It wasn't the first time whispers about intervention had surfaced either. There'd been a report that CBS executives sat down with Romo after a difficult season, in what was described using a loaded word, an intervention, though the network pushed back on that characterization. The New York Post reported that CBS executives met with the former Dallas Cowboys quarterback following the 2021 season, in what was described as an intervention, but the network denied the characterization, explaining that it regularly meets with all of its on-air talent. By late 2024, Nantz was still fighting the same battle, this time framing the criticism as flat-out unfair, given how much Romo had grown in the role. In a joint appearance on the SI Media podcast, Nantz punched back at Romo's critics, saying the scrutiny and constant evaluation is unfair, given how effective Romo is as a broadcaster and his commitment to evolving. He described a real bond forming behind the scenes, even talking about celebrating Romo's improvement in private. Nantz said Tony was in year 8, that he feels the progression more than anyone, and that 4 or 5 weeks in a row they'd walk out of the booth, and he'd give Romo a big bear hug, telling him how proud he was, describing a generation gap between them where he tried to be a mentor. On the surface, that sounds like a partnership holding strong against outside noise. And Romo himself brushed off the criticism the same way. When asked about it directly, he described the scrutiny as something he'd simply learned to tune out. Tony Romo's broadcasting career has been like a roller coaster. At the onset, he seemed to have a crystal ball in the booth alongside Jim Nantz, calling plays before the audience saw them. But here's the thing about a defense that has to be repeated year after year. Eventually, people stop asking whether the partnership is fine and start asking why it keeps needing defending in the first place. Nantz calling it misinformation in 2023 was one thing. Nantz having to say the exact same thing again in 2024 and then again in 2026 is a pattern. And that pattern is exactly what caught the attention of the reporters whose job is to cover these booths for a living. Reporters who, unlike Nantz, had no reason to keep the story quiet. While Nantz kept insisting publicly that nothing was wrong, a different version of the story was circulating through the people who actually cover network television for a living, and their reporting told a much less comfortable story. Andrew Marchand of The Athletic is about as connected as sports media reporters get, and in January he laid out concerns that went beyond simple performance criticism. The Athletic's Andrew Marchand observed that Romo doesn't appear as if he does the homework, and separately that whatever trust once bound him to Nantz is not there. That's not a fan on social media complaining about one broadcast. That's a veteran media reporter describing an actual erosion in the relationship at the center of CBS's flagship NFL crew. Marchand didn't stop there. He turned it into an ongoing conversation on his own podcast, specifically framing it as something CBS leadership had to be aware of. In a sports media podcast, Andrew Marchand and John Meter-Perrell analyzed what CBS can do about its Jim Nantz and Nantz-Romo booth problem. Calling it a problem in the headline of his own newsletter wasn't an accident. That's a reporter with sources inside the building signaling something is genuinely off. His colleague on that podcast used an even sharper word to describe Romo's on-air presence. After John Meter-Perrell said he felt Romo had become disassociated during broadcasts, Marchand explained how he'd seen the booth evolve, working against both Nantz and Romo. Marchand went as far as saying he respects CBS's top executives and producers too much to believe they hadn't noticed the exact same issue he was seeing. He even broke down specific in-game strategy that suggested CBS itself might be managing around the problem. Marchand said it seemed clear they had a game plan going in for Romo to hang back and let Nantz do the heavy lifting at the beginning, noting they tried something similar in the Super Bowl a few years earlier, and it would have been fine if they hadn't messed up the ending. That's not casual criticism. That's a reporter describing a production team actively working around a strained dynamic in real time, on the NFL's biggest stage. Fans picked up on the same thing without needing insider sources. During a Bills-Broncos broadcast, Romo brought up Patrick Mahomes in a game that had nothing to do with him, and the reaction was immediate. One fan asked how Romo managed to bring up Mahomes at all. A third fan wrote asking why Romo was talking about Mahomes while Broncos and Bills were playing. And another social media user flatly demanded the network fire him. Chris Mad Dog Russo, never one to soften an opinion, went at Romo directly on air, describing years of frustration finally reaching a boiling point. Russo said he didn't want to go crazy because he told people years ago that Romo was awful, and now everybody agrees, calling him an absolutely horrendous broadcaster who is stealing money, making $17 million through 2030, meaning CBS can't get rid of him. That's a national radio voice essentially arguing the contract itself has become the only thing keeping Romo in the chair. Nantz kept swinging back against every version of this. In one appearance, he leaned into calling Romo simply different, framing the polarizing style as a feature rather than a flaw. Nantz fired back with unwavering support for his colleague, telling the host that first off, Romo is unique, and you don't want everyone out there to be the same. He praised the unscripted, reactive energy that had made Romo famous in the first place. Nantz said that's what makes him fun, that it's authentic, that it's who he is, adding he likes the shooting from the hip, off the cuff, reactionary style, noises and all. He repeated the same joyride language he'd used before, insisting neither of them let outside chatter affect the broadcast. Nantz said they've been together for 9 years and called it a joyride. Even CBS's own chairman got pulled into denying anything formal had happened behind the scenes. Chairman Sean McManus denied characterizations of formal intervention meetings, stating there were just normal evaluation talks with analysts. So by early this year, you had two completely different stories running on parallel tracks. Nantz, publicly, calling it a joyride and insisting the chemistry has never been better. And reporters with actual sources inside the building describing a trust deficit, a disassociated on-air partner, and a production team quietly restructuring broadcasts to manage around it. Both of those things were true at the exact same time, right up until the arrest happened and turned a quiet media dispute into a very public crisis. So here's where all of this lands. Two separate storylines. The on-air chemistry questions that had been building for years, and the sudden legal trouble that put Romo on ice, collided in the same summer, and now nobody quite knows how to separate them. The contract situation hasn't changed. Whatever happens with the leave, whatever Watt does filling in, Romo's deal runs through 2030 and pays him roughly the same figure it always has. The network pays Romo around $18 million a year on a contract that does not expire until 2030. And Romo has worked in this role for CBS since the start of the 2017 season. Money like that doesn't just vanish because of one bad month. And multiple sources inside the network have said as much directly. But not fired and not damaged are two very different things. Even before the arrest, people close to the booth were already floating the idea that CBS might quietly restructure its top broadcast team for the coming season. Whether CBS would demote Jim Nantz and Tony Romo for the 2026 season was a popular question floating around NFL circles, with plenty of people calling for Ian Eagle and J.J. Watt to replace Nantz and Romo as the #1 broadcast crew for CBS. Watt stepping in during Romo's leave only adds fuel to that speculation, a temporary fill-in that a lot of viewers now hope becomes permanent. Nantz, for his part, kept defending the partnership right up until the arrest changed the conversation entirely. Just months earlier, he was still describing their run together in glowing terms, telling one interviewer he'd been working with Romo for 9 years and loved him, calling it a thrill and something he considers himself fortunate to be part of. He kept saying it in different rooms to different hosts, using almost the exact same words each time. Evidence, depending on how you read it, either of genuine loyalty or of a talking point he'd been repeating so often, it had become reflex. The uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all of it is that both things can be real. Nantz can genuinely consider Romo a close friend and still be part of a broadcast operation where producers are, according to reporting, actively managing around friction in real time. A network can insist a job is safe while simultaneously auditioning his replacement on national television. None of that is contradictory. It's just what happens when a business relationship and a financial contract get tangled up with genuine personal history. What happens next depends entirely on things nobody can control right now. How Romo's legal situation resolves, whether Watt's run alongside Nantz clicks the way fans calling for a change are hoping it will, whether CBS decides once the leave ends that this is the moment to finally make the change reporters like Marchand had already flagged as a real possibility before any arrest happened. For now, the booth chemistry question and the legal question are stuck together, feeding off each other in the same news cycle. Nantz spent years insisting there was nothing to see here. Reporters with sources inside the building spent almost as long suggesting otherwise. And now, with Romo sidelined and Watt sitting in his old chair, CBS has an entire season to figure out which version of that story it wants to be true going forward, and whether the partnership Nantz has defended so many times still has a broadcast booth left to come back to.